This episode of the Park People podcast is brought to you by BCI Burke. Play is where development soars and communities come together. At BCI Burke, we believe outdoor spaces should be thoughtfully designed, built to last, and welcoming to everyone. Because when design is intentional, people feel it. Learn more at bciburke.com.
There we go. Okay. All right. Here we go. Hey, everybody. Rodney Ock here, publisher of PRB Plus magazine and host of the Park People podcast. I am with Julia Rozakis and Chelsea Hoffman, who are both principals at APE Studio in New York City. The self-proclaimed, they said, center of the universe, so that's good. Today we're talking about their project and their article about digging into sand play, which is live on prbplus.com right now and was in the June issue. We're going to talk a little bit about why this is a timeless playground edition and why it's worth the investment. And Julia, why don't you start? First of all, welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining us on this couple days before the 4th holiday week. It was nice to see that we're all being productive, because I'm not sure my people are.
Yeah, it's probably going to wind down tomorrow afternoon.
That's okay. It's good. 250 years is something special too. So
yes,
that's kind of cool.
Sure.
So anyways, why don't you take us through, the article itself. Let's talk a little bit about, why sand play is what it is. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but we could probably start at the beginning, and then why you think it's, worthy investment and features, advantages, benefits, and the project and all that kind of stuff. So I will shut up and let you educate us.
Well, thanks again for having us.
Sure.
It's really actually timely that you mentioned July 4th is coming up. A lot of people will be at the beach and they will be experiencing the wonders of sand play. So it's pretty intuitive to anyone who has experienced it. That said, maybe there are a lot of kids in cities or, in the heartland who don't have access to sand, so they may not. So giving them a sand play and a playground is a wonderful addition to their sensory experience. And really, the benefit of sand is that it's a sensory rich material. And as one of our colleagues, Megan Tolarowski of Studio Ludo, says in the article, when you're building a playground, what is your intention? Are you building Disneyland? Are you creating what she calls a sensory rich experience that they'll want to come back to again and again? And we'll get into the reasons why sand makes kids or families want to come back to a place again and again. But I think it's really interesting, as we point out in the article, that playgrounds really started with sand, and that's kind of counterintuitive. You might think that it would have started with equipment, but the equipment that was provided first and foremost was sand, and really just a big sand pile. That was something that was started in Germany in the 1880s, and a child development expert brought that idea to Boston, and it really took off. So rather than being something new to playgrounds, it really is the origin of public playgrounds in the United States.
Well, what I would add, in addition to being a sensory rich experience, which is not untrue, but I think one of the other reasons also that it has this kind of origin aspect is that it's just an invitation to the imagination, right? If you think of a typical playground in this country, if you just close your eyes and think of it, you imagine a set structure, right? And a child might look at it and have lots of things to overlay, but there is nothing that is so manipulable and so freeform as sand, with maybe the exception of water.
Yes. So when we're talking about sand play, are you, when we talk about maybe its origin story, and it was there without equipment, right? So that makes sense, like a beach, right? We all get that. Did it ever transition into like a safety surface under equipment, or was it always always separate? Like I'm thinking now about public parks, growing up, and it's funny that you mentioned this because like I don't remember a lot of sand features
Yeah.
in park locations growing up. Like I can't even think of one that I've been to recently. Maybe I didn't notice it, right? That
Yeah.
has it has a, I'm going to call it a sand feature for lack of a better term. But so is it something that maybe went away and is coming back? Was it ever considered a safety surface? It's probably went past the test these days.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, but it is a safety service, and in the Consumer Product Safety Commission handbook for public playground safety, it is one
Okay.
of the listed surfaces, right?
All
Because
right, I didn't know that.
it
Okay.
does have a kind of attenuation property to it, right? It suffered when ADA was passed because it's not a service you can easily traverse in a wheelchair, right?
Right.
There are sand wheelchairs that exist. Maybe if you've been to some beaches, you've seen them.
Yeah.
So it's possible to look at it and think about ways to make it more accessible, but because it's not accessible to wheelchairs, it generally does not find its way often as into playgrounds as a safety surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about using it intentionally as a design feature. How does that work? How does that look? What are some creative ideas? What are some best practices maybe that people, if they want to add sand to their existing, spaces. How do you start and how does that look?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question, then I want to come back around to the benefits to some benefits we haven't talked about sand, but
Well, you can
well,
start.
we should
You
start
can, you
with,
can start with the benefits.
well, no. Well, I'll answer your question. And
Okay.
some of what I'm about to say are coming from our own landscape architect on staff, who is quoted in the article, Max Dorizio, and also Nilda Cosco from the Natural Learning Initiative at the University of at North Carolina State University.
Mhm.
She and her organization came out with guidelines for designing sand play areas that I think are really helpful. So one of the best ways, the big maintenance issue, and this is a real contraindication for a lot of organizations for using sand, is that it travels. So it's going to get on the pathways, it's going to get in people's shoes. So, it's going to in people's pockets. It doesn't stay in its place. So really the main focus of design for a sand play area from a maintenance perspective is how to keep the sand in the bowl, kind of. So one way to do that is to actually create the sand pit as a bowl, with like a soup bowl with tapered sides, and then when it gets out, it can just be brushed or shoveled right back in. Another way is to surround the sand area with seeding or some kind of barrier or planting that will capture the sand and keep it from traveling. If you can't do that, you could create a single point of or limited points of entries and put a grading over that will capture the sand as it goes in and out.
Okay.
In terms of designing, a space that will promote sand play, correct me if I'm wrong about Chelsea, but I don't think there's too much you need to do, because as we said, the original playground was a sandbox, and once a child can get in there, they know what to do. They're going to dig, they're going to mound, they're going to create some shape.
At its most basic level, it's just exploring a material, right? And there are not many other materials that you can manipulate so freely in so many ways and explore with no threshold to entry, right? Like you don't need to learn, you don't need a saw, you don't need to learn how to work with a power tool, you don't need to do anything fancy. You can just explore it, right?
You also
Right.
don't need much courage. And
Well,
maybe the place where sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, maybe the place where you do need courage and sand play is very effective at kind of overcoming this fear is it's so collaborative. You want someone's going to come join you in making your fort or your castle. You need someone to cover your legs. And another very nice aspect to it about this low barrier to entry is that parents can play very easily in sand. No matter, it takes very little effort. You can just be sitting
Right.
next to your child and digging lackadaisically even an account. So it's easy, it's soothing, it stimulates the imagination. And although we don't cover this in the article and I don't have the numbers in front of me, it's not expensive, so
Yeah.
the maintenance is really the issue.
Well, and so it passes the multi-generational test, which more and more playgrounds are being geared towards, right?
Yeah.
Where do you land on adding, play elements into it? Not playground equipment, but like buckets and shovels and water. I've seen some pictures in your article where there was some water feature that was integrated into the sand play area. There were other like wooden trains and some of those types of things, like, and then there's some comment in the article about, you don't need to do any of that. Like just having the sand alone is enough.
Yes.
Where do you, how do people in reality, when they maybe that's a bad term, but like in the real world or whatever, when they put these in, are people more apt to provide some other stimuli, let's call them buckets or whatever, like features, or is it more popular to just have the sand area as a play space, or is it kind of a mix?
If you, we're going to talk about what you could add in a minute, but if you just have a sand pit, people will bring their toys.
Yeah. Okay.
They're going to want buckets and shovels and trucks, and they'll bring them those things. If you provide them, they tend to walk, so you might as well just let people bring them and leave them. Then you have
gotcha.
endless supply of
and I'm sure they get left behind too when they bring their own, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to let Chelsea talk about water in a minute, but I will say that our clients have found that adding some permanent sand feature really just elevates the sand play. I don't mean physically, I mean conceptually.
Right. The experience.
And this gets back to that idea of what's going to bring families or children back again. It just adds a level of interest, communication, visual interest,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it augments what's already fantastic about sand play. And I'm gonna talk about water.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I would say that if someone is thinking about what else could I provide, the easy answer, and there's only one answer, is water.
Okay.
And there is a quote by Richard Dabner, who you were recently in Central Park, so I don't know if you went to any of the playgrounds in Central Park, but some, they have his historic fingerprint. And about one of them, he said, look, like the playground is the sand and the water and everything else is extra.
Yeah.
And really, when you add water to sand, suddenly you have this additional layer of exploration, right? Like now we're like moving, right? Because we can create cement. And so now we can build.
Right.
So just kind of soothing, moving things back and forth, seeing how deep you can dig, which has deep developmental benefits alone, this act of digging. Then now you can really get into engineering and not only moving the sand, but you also now can start working with water, and you have this aspect of hydrology that you can be playing with. So to answer your question, if you were to think about one other thing, I would say water. Because the last thing that we didn't talk about is that even if children don't bring toys, they don't think to bring toys, or toys aren't provided, nature has plenty of toys, right? There are undoubtedly somewhere around, there are going to be grass, leaves, sticks, right? Like all of these things are just additional tools, additional little structures that you can make, roads you can pave in your sand village. It's all open for the imagination.
Right. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit. I got a couple of questions on the maintenance side real quick, and then we'll move into some other things. But you kind of make a point in the article about drainage, right? That's obviously a huge issue. And if we're going to introduce water, that's not coming from the sky, it's an even bigger issue, right? Like, so, what are best practices there? And then What are good sizes of sand play areas? Like, is there any standardization? Like, you know, if you don't, if you don't have a footprint that's at least this size, you might have a problem because it's going to be crowded, or is it just use the space you have and it is what it is? Like, I guess it's a two-part question for you.
We talk about drainage.
I could have hard drainage. I mean, yes, undoubtedly, like drainage is extremely important. And even if you're not adding water, you want to give some consideration to drainage from just because water does come from the sky, right? And you can have drainage problems on your site.
Yeah.
Even without having intensely planned for or against it. But so I would say that yes, absolutely, you want to plan for a drain, you want to plan for clean outs. But I would say beyond that, in terms of thinking about maintenance, if there is the opportunity to engage with maintenance people and talk to them about sand in the play space before it's there, it's also rather important. We tend to think of maintenance members as like the godfathers of play, right? If they're not out there and taking care of the space and making sure everything is in working order, the children don't get to play in the way that
Right.
that space was offered to them. And our experiences, we're not going to sugarcoat it. Like there is a maintenance burden when it comes to sand, but the maintenance professionals that we have worked with who really care for these spaces and see firsthand the benefits for play and children, they won't tell you it's not painful at times, but they understand it and they see how it's valuable and actually that the effort is for a very important purpose.
Yeah, we see people who manage big beaches, have a lot of equipment needs for, trash and glass and all that stuff that gets under the surface that people walking barefoot could get cut on and hurt on, leveling out, all those kids make all those holes, and then people walk the beach at night and they step into a hole, um, you know, you're working with, that's why I was kind of asking about the size of the space we're talking, because we're probably
Yeah.
working with a smaller space. So I would assume that, you know, the tool that, the maintenance of it is relatively simple. Maybe a rake is all you need. I don't know.
I would tell you it's simple, but compared to a beach,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, you look, best practices, you are still raking it in the morning, right? Because you're looking for those types of things that might have been left overnight. But on the whole, I would say in terms of size, it really depends on your space itself and the audience and the population that you are serving, right? We have worked on some really large destination gathering spaces where a small sandbox obviously won't cut it because it will be overcrowded. But
Mhm.
there are other places where if it's a small community park, then it's very possible that won't get overcrowded. And in fact, just having that provision is better than none at all, we would say.
Yeah.
And where do you land on the amenities? Like, you talked earlier about, benches, this is probably speaks a little bit more towards multi-generational kind of
Mhm.
play, right? But like shade, benches, picnic tables, are those, it seems like they would all go hand in hand with something like this, or is that not true?
Well, the one thing you mentioned now that is really key is shade, because as we've said, sand play is so compelling. Kids
Right,
are going
and
to be
sand gets hot.
doing it for hours, with their head down, looking down and concentrated. So shade is really critical in that case. And we would say if you can't provide shade, provide a sunscreen dispenser, because
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
people.
Do you have issues with the sand heating up like you do in other places? Surface temperatures being too hot?
I mean, sure, it will heat up, but all surfaces really do heat in parks. And
Yeah.
you had mentioned safety surfaces at the very beginning. There are other safety surfaces. Rubber is a very common one. I'm sure everyone is familiar with,
Sure.
and that also gets extremely hot, right? So
Yeah.
it It does. It's not that it doesn't get hot, but also many people do have the experience of the beach sand, right? Like
Right.
you have references in your mind.
Right.
that
Right.
But it's just the top layer too.
right. Just
Yeah.
you can
Exactly.
just
Pull your feet off right
just
away.
as you do on the beach. Quickly, dig down.
Yeah.
Earlier in the conversation, you kind of used the word sensory because obviously it's a tactile thing. What implications does it have for people with sensory issues, right? Like we're getting a lot of as you know, playground equipment that's now being designed with sensory and tactile and whatever, allowing people of different abilities to play on it and play together on it.
Yeah.
It feels like this is meets all those needs, without any of the adaptive equipment.
I think so. There are two things that came to mind as you were speaking about that. One is we have found for people with mobility issues, two ways to help those people access the sand. One is a transfer platform, so someone would get out if they're in a wheelchair out, and they could actually get into the sand full body. Or sometimes we design elevated cables that kind of drape over the boundary between the general sand play area and the wheelchair accessible pathway, so they don't have to leave their
Device.
chair, but can also their device, but also can play with the people as part of the whole sand play area.
Yeah. Okay.
Another thing that came to mind was something I witnessed myself at a park in a playground outside of Chicago called Bison's Bluff at the Spring Valley Nature Preserve. And there was a child there with his grandmother, and it was clear that he had neurological condition. But he was playing quite independently in the playground generally, but he spent maybe an hour at the sand and water play table and really just experimenting with the materials and letting the water run over his hands. And the grandmother pulled me aside and said that he was nonverbal, and she said, he usually doesn't like to get his hands dirty, and he usually doesn't like to be with people, but in that environment he felt really fascinated and comfortable. I'm not saying sand and water did it, but that is what he was doing. She made the comment for sure. So
right. Well, what advice? So I'm kind of out of questions. Is there anything that we you guys are the experts here? Is there anything we should have discussed that anything we missed? Any big areas that we missed? I mean, we kind of hit on maintenance. We kind of hit on design. We kind of hit on some of the features, advantages, benefits that come with sand just by it being sand. Is there anything that we missed?
Well, I will just reiterate what Chelsea mentioned about the maintenance team. Again, we don't discount that it's extra work. It's going to be extra work, but again, it's important for because they're so critical. It's important for them to really feel the benefit and understand why. So, and just to take a step back from there, the playground designer should give real consideration and weigh the benefits, which we've expressed are huge, against the capacity of the team, so people should feel bad if they can't sand play, but if they could.
And I think as an industry, we've gotten a lot better at that, right? Like if the designs are coming, if the playground spaces are coming from a playground manufacturer and one of their design experts, that they've pretty much got I don't want to say a script, but they basically have a script of things that they're going to want to walk through in a more creative way than the script. And that's going to be one of those discussions, right? Like, what is this? What are the implications for maintenance? What is the lifelong cost of the maintenance of this? Is this something that we've properly allocated funds for and time for and personnel for? And, I don't know that I've ever heard, getting the maintenance team on your side, but I'm sure that's probably something that does, happen, maybe organically, if not intentionally, right? Because they're the ones who are probably going to install the place, so they know what they're getting into.
Right.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting. It's kind of funny to me, not funny, it's kind of interesting to me, curious to me. Like, we live in the mountains here in Idaho, and all of our play is what I would consider natural play, right? It's in the mountains, it's on rocks, it's in snow, it's in water, it's in whatever. And, our kids are, you know, they grow up like wandering away for a week and coming back, right? Like, and
Yeah.
this is very primal in the same way, right? Like it's just, um, you know, nobody has to be sold on the fun of playing in the sand. I wouldn't
Um,
think.
no, but I would just add one more benefit overall. So far, all of the benefits that we have talked about are really focused on the user, right? The child, the experience, which is the thing that we're there to create. But from an organizational perspective, that there have been studies, and Megan who's quoted in the article, has contributed in part to this, but these spaces that have sand and water, they allow for a kind of play that's very long and has a flow to it, a little bit like the boy that Julia was speaking to. But that sort of flow just really leads to increased dwell time. And so if you as an organization, right, are trying to get people to come and to stay, it's a really great thing to add. And we see it, we have a small installation at the Presidio. It's a sand and water play space. And what they tell us there is that people will stop because they know there's a playground if they're kind of on a longer road trip, and they think, okay, we're just gonna burn off some energy 20 minutes or so. And then,
Right.
1 to 2 hours later,
Yeah,
so,
right.
so really, if you're not sold on sand and water
Right.
when really thinking about children and the users, then if you're trying to get people to come, you
Buy
can
soda.
yeah, exactly. Just put in some sand.
Yeah. Do you find that more and more people, is it coming back, or, is it becoming more popular? Is there a trend of any sort that you've noticed, or is it, you know, it's always been part and parcel, and
That's a very good question. I don't know that it's like wholesale coming back.
yeah,
But I think that there have been increasingly some of these larger spaces, some that we've worked on, some that we haven't worked on, but that seek to put in sand and water play. And I think that those spaces are raising the profile of what sand
right,
and water means
Yes.
in a play space.
right.
Right.
So it's trying. It's trying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's so interesting because I'm thinking about, as we've been talking about all the places that I've been, all the park. I mean, I've been to, like you guys, maybe not millions of parks, but certainly a lot of parks. And I'm struggling to come up with places that had dedicated sand play areas. Like I'm sure I've seen them. Maybe I just didn't pay attention to them, or maybe it was so, oh yeah, whatever. Like it was a nothing burger and I didn't pay attention to it. But I can't honestly think of many, um, as I sit here talking to you guys.
No, it's true. It's true. Because actually a lot of municipal parks and rec departments do sort of have bans on sand for maintenance reasons.
Okay.
Again, like we're not going to sugarcoat that there is a maintenance aspect to it, but
Yeah.
our pitch and argument is that it's really worth it. The benefit really makes it worth it.
Well, and this is the kind of industry too, as one community brings it in and has success, the neighboring communities will recognize that, and that's kind of how things grow in our world, right? Like community by community, region by region. So some of these bigger parks, that have already put it in, if they've had success, it's likely that it's probably on the rise. So, well, cool. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for writing the article. We loved it. And
Pleasure.
folks can read it at prbplus.com right now, if they haven't already read it in the magazine. It's all over. It'll be all over social media if it hasn't already been there. That's not my department, but Jeffrey does a good job of that. And if we saw it, okay, good. And away we go. So you guys have a great 4th of July, and come back sometime. We'll
Great.
talk about another project.
Okay.
Cool.
Bye.
All right, thanks, guys.
Bye.